Good afternoon, evening, morning, whatever it is with you. Welcome to Nature Echoes on this Wednesday, 8th of November 2023. So thank you very much for joining me. This is our weekly time of echoing news, stories, poetry, and art, and all connected to nature folklore and our precious water, the holy wells, the woodlands, hedges, and wildlife. So hail, hail, hole, and holy good health for you all. Now, through this edition, we get some pictures up here. It's about the origins and confusions of the word Sawan or Sawin, Savan, whichever way you talk about it. And I'm going to talk about a star cluster reference from old times. This is a reference definitely from the past that's of this time, that's getting a lot of new current interest. And hopefully we'll have time for a couple of tribute echoes on top of that as well. And if I've got time, this is going to be quite a long one actually, because these echoes that I'm sharing with you today really have to be shared today, which is the day after the cross quarter, which was yesterday. So we've got a bit of time. I'll give you some latest update with what's happening with what I'm doing on Substack. But as usual, this Nature Echoes Live and the growing nature folklore video articles, photo library, journaling, nature folklore, all the course modules I do, they're brought to you due to the support of our kind subscribers. And I'm not going to do much of a pledge thing today, but that's the link. If you go there, look amongst the links, and you'll actually find a link there where you can become a subscriber, get all the extras, as well as my articles. You get the extras like the Om Prompt course, and I'm going to throw a lot more in as well, because it's the support subscribers that keeps this show on the air, so I can pay my monthly and annual subscription fees to keep that going. And good evening to Cliff Carr, who's just come on board there, and lovely to see you here again. Also, Robert Paulson, he might not be on at the moment. He came through YouTube, and he's saying, yes, because of the title, the Samhain, the greatest country singer of all time. I've got something to say about him a bit later on. I love this time of year. So I'm going to get on, I believe, see if anybody, it's nice to see people are still tuning in. I see the figures are going up a bit now. And so I'm going to get on with the first echo here. And it's, here we go. It's all about this Sawan or Sawin name, as you may mention it. And see if this is what's appropriate. Actually, this first echo actually comes from a posting by Monumental Ireland, and I believe the person behind Monumental Ireland is a lad called John Layla. Please correct me if I'm wrong, if you're more familiar with Monumental Ireland. It's got thousands and thousands of subscribers, a very popular resource, and his postings break down recent posting that he made, it breaks down the meaning of the word that we use a lot around this time, and that is the Sawan, Sawin, and of course the plain Samhain. And I'll speak of John as if John Layla, that's his picture there, him on the left there, because he holds lots of art exhibitions with the photos he takes at the various sites that he goes to. So I'll speak as if it's John Layla informing us. I'm going to put, obviously, as usually, you add a few of my own little extras in as well. And John, he firms up that the word Sawan, or the older Gaelic, old Irish Savan, probably goes back to quite ancient history. But how our modern spiritual neo-pagan people celebrate what they call Sawan or Samhain today, he claims that this is through ancient traditions. This actually is not correct, and most of what we celebrate, what we celebrate as Sawan today, is actually adopted from customs and conventions that are developed around the Irish observance of All Hallows Day. and the much more modern day before, night before, the Halloween. And the celebrations today, they have very few connections, if any, to the ancient practice and the seasonal celebrations. And this is actually so with all of the cross-quarter time celebrations and also the solstice and equinox celebrations too. They're all modern interpretations. It's not surprising. Modern people in different circumstances to the ancients, this is bound to happen. So John investigates, what does Samhain or Samhain mean or did mean? And John actually reassures us that the Samhain debate is not a debate about whether the alignments on some megalithic monuments, that's actually me taking the photograph of the sun shining in the standing stone within Cairnell, and we can't even get close to that anymore. That's Cairnell on Loch Crew. But he says, let's say I think about that again. Sorry, I'm as usual, I'm equipment messing as well. But John, he says, when we get down to the debate of the alignment of megalithic monuments, the proof of Samhain being celebrated as far back as Neolithic times, which would be 4,000 to 2,500 BC, he suggests that the ancient people may have celebrated something to match their configured alignments that are marked by the stones, because why on earth would they build them otherwise? Because they were like their own sky clocks in a way. But they wouldn't, when these megalithic sites were being built or were built, they wouldn't have had any kind of sound or word or prompt that was even close to the Samhain word that we had today. Not even a hint of that has been found, although there's been some hints of the Samhain word being used 1,000, 2,000 years after perhaps the more recent of these megalithics. Now, taking a modern interpretation of Samhain, a lot of people today tend to retranslate it out as meaning the end of summer or summer's end more appropriately. But this comes from working with an old Irish word of Sam, which does mean summer, and Fun, which means end. Sorry, I was going to try and find time to put all these spellings up, because in this echo, I'm going to come up with a lot of spellings, but I've only just got the photos up a few seconds ago, and I didn't find the time to put the spellings up. So forgive me for that. I'll try and spell them out as we get to them. Anyway, Sam for summer and Fun for the meaning the end. And let's get this up. And there we go. There's another one, another word that you will see from time to time. And this more accurately describes setting. And because some traditionalists, they like to actually spell Samhain as Samhain, like on that can of beer there. But scholars of medieval scribing, they may talk about the practice of interpretation. And this practice they call a folk, I can't remember the word now, etymology, folk etymology. And this is what can bring about very popular misconceptions about the origins and meanings of ancient things. So in Samhain, it's a word that the medieval scribes and later the Christian clerics, they really didn't know the meaning of it. They picked up on the word, but they didn't know the meaning. And so for their own convenience, they used Samhain, the UIN ending, because of its combination of Sam and Fun. So you've got the summer's end. And that to them is an alternative explanation of what was established as the Christian All Hallows. And this All Hallows Day, today at least anyway, these days, it's on November the 1st or 1st of November, depending which side of the pond you interpret that. So with these Christian scribing clerics, Sam and Fun became Samhain at the end of summer or summer's end. And this was especially true after the time of Pope Gregory, who changed our entire calendar and gave us the calendar we use today during October 1582. This is Gregory the 13th. I'm going to be talking about Gregory the 3rd in a minute. But the 13th, Gregory, he introduced a new solar calendar, which we and most of the humans on Earth use today. And Sam, the word Sam, our summer Sam, seems to come to us from European words. There's Samos, Samos, and there's also from Eastern Europe, Gaul area, Sem, Sem, and they both mean summer. But Sem, Sem, it could also be used or was used as describing people being together and being as one, assumingly in summer as well. But this word, it developed into another European word, Samhain, and Samhain, Samoni, Oni, that's right. And that describes a gathering or assembly, and again, assembly and a grouping that actually happens through the summer. However, within that same lunar, let's get this picture up if I can, within that same lunar calendar is another word, Gimonius. I hope I got pronounced that right, Gimonius. And that developed from another word, Gimos, which was a European Gaulish word meaning winter. And Gimos developed from an earlier word, Gheim, Gheim, that actually describes winter, and it's really describing the weather conditions of winter, and it's with its snow and its storms and frosts. So that was Gheim, Gheim, I think that is. And they also, from that European Gheim, Gheim, sorry, I haven't got this up again, as I say, from the Gheim word came the old Irish word of Gheim. Oh, sorry, I'm pronouncing it wrong. Gheim, that's it. And that became Gam. The Gheim was Gaim, and that got shortened to Gam, Gam. And that is also, it's an old Gaelic word, and it was used to describe winter and winter storms. So from that were the words, also ancient, not really used today, was Gamred. And that's either spelled Gaimred or Gamred in the shorthand. And again, that was described to use the conditions of the winter season. So the word Sam for summer, there we go, that became Savra, and that describes the summertime. I don't know if you can read that, but there's a list of activities that could be described, and we're familiar with that we use during Savra. And you'll be familiar with that anyway. But the interesting part on that is the addition of the rad, radh part of that, because that word is very relevant to another old Irish word, wrath. And a wrath actually describes, or used to describe, a quarter of the solar year. And that would be the quarter between any of the cross quarter days. So a chunk of that, for instance, is like we've come through the Lunasa through to what we call the Samhain, which I'm now going to really confuse you with, but that's a wrath, that period of time. And I also wonder if that's how the ancient celebration sites that are called wraths are linked to that today. And this is the Rathra, which this is a picture from the Roscommon Centre that they have in Tulsk, if I got that. There we go. That's a wonderful place to visit, Rathra. And for those of you who've been to the Hill of Ward, Talatka, you'll recognize that as being very similar, but the Rathra is actually still in much better condition. And those both sites are very relevant to what we're calling the Samhain time now. So from what I've just shared with you, we have a language situation of Sam or Samra, which describes summer, and we got the Gamred describing winter. So there's a question now of what is what we call Samhain today, not called Gaman or Gawain. You know, we call it Samhain or Samhain. Why isn't it called Gaman or Gawain? Now, going back to the 9th century again, there's a text that's known as the Sanus Cormac, and this and the old Irish word that I was talking about, Gawain, that's actually scribed into this book, and the way it's scribed into it, it describes as what we know as the month of November, what we call November now, under the calendar we use now, the Gregory calendar. And there is a line in this that actually reads, Imagame, see if I can get this right, Imagame Ire Samhain. And that translates in the month of winter after Samhain. And that in that line, the uin ends is not an AIN ending. It's not like so on, the AIN at the end, so on, so in, or gamoon. Anyway, me going is the month of November, and that's what follows All Hallows Day. That's the whole point of what's scribed there. So why did Samhain or Samhain word that is so obviously referring to summer come to replace the winter word of Gawain or Gowan, and eventually be used, the familiar name we use now for the festival, and also for the month that follows, November, which we're in now, that all marks the beginning of winter. Now, an earlier Pope Gregory, this is Pope Gregory the Third, not 13th, he was a culprit for all this confusion. And in the mid-8th century, Pope Gregory the Third, he moved the date of All Hallows Day. Actually, All Hallows Day is a date to celebrate the early Christian martyrs. And so he moved it from its original date, which was May the 13th on the Julian calendar. So he moved it. I don't know why. He moved it to a new date of 1st of November, on November the 1st. And then he tagged on All Souls Day after that for celebrating on November the 2nd. I'll talk about why maybe put the All Souls Day. It's the reason he actually moved the saints, because the All Souls Day was a day of celebration for those that have passed on. And of course, all of these Christian martyrs that were celebrated in May, these were the saints that had moved on as well. So I suppose he thought, that's perhaps more appropriate to move to November. So that's what he did. And anyway, you've been saying some comments. We've got Terry Hardwick, Psych Hardwick here, who's saying, from rural Maryland, nice to see you here, Terry. Wonderful, great stuff. I see the numbers are really coming up now. So anyone who's got questions and comments, because this echo is quite deep. There's a lot of stuff to it. You might need to hear it a few times. But by the Christian 8th century, all traces of any previous religious beliefs, the traditions, festivals, and customs, they'd either been wiped out or they had been adjusted to fit in with the new Christian religion. And now, sorry, I should have a picture. There we go. And so now today, sorry, I've still got this damn cough. So now, what we call Halloween was also just about lost all of the association there was at this time with the Christian feast day of All Hallows or All Saints. So by the 8th century in Ireland, the words Samhain or Samhain, they'd also lost their original meanings, and they'd become Gaelic words just to really be convenient, just to have a Gaelic identity by having alternative words for the Roman Christians, calling it the All Hallows Day. No, we still want to keep this Gaelic, so we're going to use these words just to be appropriated for the day. And at that point, they had really lost their earlier meaning. So when Pope Gregory III moved All Hallows Day from mid-May to November the 1st, using the Julian calendar, the word Samhain totally lost its original meaning. And nobody thought anything of it, moving it from mid-May to November. That's how it lost its meaning. There was some reason, no recognition it had all been lost. Anyway, it took about 100 years after Pope Gregory III to see the change of date appear that the Pope had done. It didn't really seem to appear in text until about 100 years later. There probably was text at the time, but nobody's ever found them. And we've got this book here. It should be coming up. There we go. That's the Martyrology of Angus the Culdee. And within that, there's a list of saints and their feast days. And this was written in the early 9th century. And within this, the word Samhain is found, or Samhain, and it's found as an entry for November the 1st, All Hallows Day. And now this actually conflicts with the move of Samhain to 1st of November that is mentioned in other medieval texts. Somehow the word Beltner for May, it came about around this time as a word describing the start of summer instead. And it's wonderful for me to have read this early, because in childhood, I was always taught, this would have been in the 50s, I was always told that Beltner, that is an appropriate name. And of course, I was quite confused. They said, oh no, this time is in May is Samhain, and in November is Samhain. That's how it's pronounced to me. Samhain and Samhain. And the way it was described to me that this is the 2 times of the year when the salmon flow upstream. So I was told as a child that Beltner was a kind of Beltner was a made-up thing, but I never really took that any further, and it's only this that sort of prompted that memory. But anyway, if we consider that prior to Pope Gregory III's calendar changes, someone described the beginning of summer, not the summer's end, and it was Gamin that described the beginning of winter. So it seems clear that Sam describes summer and Gam describes winter, but both of them have this AIN ending. So what about that? What's that meaning? Well, to move on to this, John talks about our modern metamyth of describing Samhain as a harvest festival in November. Now, that might be true for southeast England, maybe, but Ireland has a very short growing season. So it may not seem these days because there's polytunnels all over the place. So that's all changed and expanded the season. But really, outside, it has a very short growing season. And cereal crops are harvested from the very end of July, the first harvest, to mid-September. But the majority of the harvesting of any cereals that are grown here is done by mid-August. Even the hay is done by them. But due to ancient climate change, there was ancient climate change not that long ago in terms of relating to the Earth as a whole. But there was a dramatic change of weather that went from warm and dry weather to colder and wetter weather. And during that time, there was a collapse, almost a total collapse of crop growing for many centuries from about 3,500 BC. And of course, this was the age that a lot of this megalith building was going on. So since about 3,500 BC, Ireland's farming did change from a priority of cereals, especially barley and oats. It changed from the arable crop farming, and the farmland became pastures. And even now in Ireland, 80% of agricultural land in Ireland is just used for pasture. And so from about 3,500 BC, farmers on this island, this island that's called Ireland now, they mainly changed from being crop and cereal growers to becoming cattle herders. Now, from this ancestral cattle culture, a tradition developed that's associated with both Gawain or Gawan that became Samhain, and Samhain that became Beltner. So let's show, I've got something here. Oh yeah, that was an attempt to get a hawthorn up because that's what we relate to as Beltner, and especially this year when the hawthorn was the blossom was most abundant. But both times of these times, the Samhain and Gawan, they include the traditional ritual of driving cattle between the two fires, the two bonfires, and this people sort of put some spiritual meanings to this, but really it was to clean the cattle of ticks and fleas before they were moved to the new pastures. And the moving of the new pastures in all areas except for Clare's Burren, it's The cattle were sent up the hills, and the young women, although this is a modern celebration of it now, just the ritual. But what did happen is the cattle were sent up onto the hills. The young women went up there, which would have been the daughters of the farming families, from what we know as Beltner today, what was known as Samhain back then. And so the culture of butter making, well, the women were up in the hills, they were milking the cattle. They did have a kind of bothy homes that they lived in. They had their own culture up there. It really was something. But they were forever making butter with the milk, because the butter was an incredible asset, a useful asset that was necessary for when the cattle came down later as part of the harvest trading. But the women going up with the cattle, that was known as bullying. I'm not going to say any more about that. I've said it talked about it in other nature folklores and also on Nature Echoes. But it was quite something. There we go. That's an old picture of a bullion woman there, but that doesn't give you a sense of the culture they go into. They shared their music and they shared their dancing. They had a hell of a time, those women up there. This ritual of moving cattle out of the way of lowlands, the original reason for this is that so the cattle wouldn't be eating up the few crops that were being grown down below for the families to provide their food. Now, one hint of the differences is the lads were down below. They were still working the lowlands, working the cereals and the other farm jobs. And because they were in the lowlands, that's where the churches were, so they had to go to mass each Sunday. But the women, they were up on the hill. Suddenly their life was free. No churches, no mass. But sometimes the lads did sneak up there as well. But the women and the cattle and the new butter stock, when they came down from the hills, from what we now know today is Samhain. But that was Gaman. Clare's Burren's very different, though. That's in reverse, and that's a huge celebration now, because the bare hills in Clare's Burren, as you know if you've been there, they're very barren, and with all that sun in summer, it heats up all those bare hills, so it becomes too hot, far too hot to send the cattle up there in summer. But that heat that falls on the Burren, it actually stays there. And it means that it's still warm on those hills in winter. So where everybody else's cows are coming down in Clare's Burren, they're going up because the warmth of the stone through the winter actually provides grazing for them. And then the lowland where they were in the winter, that recovers where they were in the summer, I mean, and that recovers, and because it's in a fallow state, and the grazing, the fauna, the very famous flowers, all that starts growing through the winter and early spring. And so when the cattle come back down the Bildner time, there's all this lovely lush grazing for them. So this cattle drive, this movement, the cattle movement, it's twice a year, and the actual description word for that tradition is transhumance. Transhumance, TRANSHUMANCE, transhumance. And so this provides grazing either way, anyway. But the cattle movement that happens twice a year, biannually, it would have been of huge significance to the ancient communities across Ireland, way before Christian times. And so the cattle moving tradition is perhaps the only surviving pre-Christian tradition that is common both to Samhain, which was formerly known as Gawain, and Beltner, which is formerly known as Samhain. So the old Irish word for cattle driving is actually, whoops, I shouldn't bring that up yet. The old Irish word for cattle driving is actually Onya, AIN. And that's, you may be familiar, that's where we get a well-known old Irish word, the Torn. And that's where I bring the picture up there. There's a cattle raid of Cooley, which is otherwise known, that story as the Torn. And actually, if you go to old Manx languages, they actually call both times that what we call the Samhain and Beltane, they actually call both of them the Torn, still in the Isle of Man. So what that word on, A-I-N, what that's simply describing is either a cattle raid or simply a cattle drive. It's really the movement of a herd of cattle from one place to another. So that's likely where we get the end of the word Sawan and go on, because they've both got this A-I-N at the end of the words. And we celebrate and enjoy this time, both times of the year in May and November. But really, this is the tradition of these times was about cattle droving. This was the leading thing. This was the leading tradition. As I say, this was around well before any Christian influence. And it really escaped Christian influence. It just kept going. So anything else that we celebrate at those times is really a romantic and is really an exaggerated mirror image of churchy celebrations, because the church is what the church put up with. And so maybe we're not pronouncing wrong these days, especially in North America. If we actually say Samhain, Samhain could well have been a cowboy that was riding into the sunset after all. So, so we've got Sam, the word Sam, is, as well as summer, it also is being used as a word for wise and awakening. And then you've got the Hain, very much linked to the cattle drover. So Sam Hain is the good old wise cattle drover who knew his seasons and aligned to the sunsets in the west. So there he is, Sam Hain after all. So I hope that echo didn't pop too many bubbles about how we now dress up and celebrate and become ultra spiritual or even ultra mischievous because of the Halloween, what we do now at this time. But I suppose there's very few of us now that have cattle in our lives. So how on earth could we follow that old tradition, because we're not dependent on the cattle? Every farm, every family tended to have their milking cow at least. We don't have that now. So what else do? We build these celebrations, these modern celebrations that's fitting at the time. So this actual looking into the past is not knocking what we do now. But I think we have to be cautious by saying that what we're doing now is from a very ancient celebration, because most of what we do, Biltner and so on, really doesn't go back further than the coming of the Christian times in early medieval times. But there was a struggle to keep a Gaelic identity, so the Gaelic identity did come up with compromises with what the church was doing, and that's, I believe, what we're doing now. We got Anthony from Mystical Ireland here. Lovely to hear, because you're right on the ball, Anthony, because I'm going to be talking about you on the next Echo. So it's lovely. Mystical Islands, Anthony is here. It looks like he's coming in through YouTube from watching from Drogheda, the gateway of the Boyne Valley. So yes, I'm going on to something where I'm actually going to be mentioning you as well, Anthony. So I'm going to be talking about the Pleiades. It's another echo that I picked up. It's from the wonderful article that's been shared this week by David Halpin. I know you did, Anthony, you showed this one as well. And this is from his wonderful Circle Stories blog on Facebook. I'm going to be putting up links on Facebook when I finish the show, because I can't type them in now with the service I've got. But I'll get you to go to Circle Stories and also to Monumental Ireland on Facebook. And you can follow through the full stories I'm talking about now. But David, what he referred to with how we observe astronomical so on is the role of the observation of the Pleiades cluster, which came up a bit too early. There we are there. That is what David put up to start his article. And how we may relate this to the path of the ancestral dead, Pleiades as being a path to the ancestral dead. Now, the astronomical cross-quarter time. It occurs here in the Northern Hemisphere. Cross-quarter time was yesterday, 7th of November. And many people today, especially the ultra-spiritual amongst us, regarded that time as the true Samhain because of our belief that it was marked by our ancient ancestors over 5,000 years ago. And relating to my previous echo, it's likely that the word Samhain had absolutely nothing to do with this. And David is saying this as well. But several ancient stone constructions, they were created and they do configure to mark what we understand as the cross-quarter moment that we've just passed. Now, David reminds us that we really do not know why this time was so important to our ancestors. It's all a lot of it's guesswork we got. And we certainly don't know how they conducted any rituals, if they did any rituals at all. So these rituals we share at this time, they're modern community inventions, the ones that we've made up, and they especially become popular since the mid-19th century, as I've mentioned, that Industrial Revolution time. Part of the Industrial Revolution is suddenly the mass of people learned to read and write. So the book trade was amazing. The printing trade was suddenly, it was like the home computer trade. Well, that started up. So all these people had these books and then would get together to try and reenact some of the stuff in the books. And I think that's how we got the rituals today. But when we look to other parts of Europe and the world, we do find a common observance going on at this time. And that's when people relate to the spirits, the ancestors, and they remember the dead. This is actually in David's article. As I say, what I'm speaking is some of my own words. Most of it is actually quoting from David Halpin as well. But today, many of us carry theories of Celtic stories, we call them, of gods and goddesses, and also these cycles being astro-theological references to the constellations and the stars within the constellations included. But there actually hasn't been much deep research into this of yet. I know I dabbled with some people in this sort of stuff in the 60s or 70s, and I can't remember how much. I don't remember much of that, and I don't even know how much was recorded or where it was stored and archived. Anyway, many megalithic monuments, the sites, they are pre-Celtic, whatever the Celtic thing is, and I'm not going to go into the endless Celtic debate right now. But what David Halpin assumes is that any deities and ancestors from ancient times that the megalithic builders may have dedicated themselves to or even built for would have been very different to the gods and goddesses that we are familiar with from Irish mythology. And we go into the remains of these megalithic sites and we're referring to these gods and goddesses when if the builders were present, they'd be scratching their heads, what's this going on? So we just don't know. But what I found fascinating, and I've looked in this to this before, and I came across it through conversation actually when I was in a wedding in Thailand. But the Asian star law, it's been written about from there. It parallels with our star law and Asian folklore. This is pre-Buddhist, and there was beliefs from the people of Siam, which is now Thailand, that the stars and constellations are a dwelling place of the Theravada. And here's a sort of artistic impression of the Theravada meeting somewhere. And these people, they are related to as being spirits and gods, similar to the Tuatha De Danann that actually came down in a mist, in the same way as what he's talked about in stories here in Leitrim. But back in April, David said he wrote about both. I vaguely remember his article. He talked about how Bildner and Samhain were both associated with the star group Pleiades. And he says that November is often called the month of Pleiades because in this month, the stars in the cluster, they become visible from dusk until dawn and stay so until Bildner. Or the time we know as Samhain and November. There may have been times when the midnight accumulation of seeing the Pleiades suddenly when the sun is down, when it's dusk fully, We might have seen it the ancients would have seen this on a cross-quarter day, and that was probably somehow celebrated in ancient times when the Pleiades vision was there. But we are in 2023 now, and the dates of Samhain and Pleiades cumulation, they're about 3 weeks out, 2 or 3 weeks out now, totally out of sync to how they were in ancient times when we had people from the Middle East and beyond that had become advanced in configurations. The configurations went into their studies of geometry and sky observations, with the purpose of sky observations being points. They weren't really interested in the stars themselves. They were using them as points for measurement back here on Earth. So the visuals of the star accumulation that used to occur in ancient times at this cross-quarter time is now towards late November. Now, the reason for this changing date is perceived is a movement of the stars, and you'll have to read up about the precession of the equinoxes in the great year. That would take me a whole 1, 2, 3 episodes of Nature Echoes, and I'd rather do that through my Substack platform than here. It's worth looking up and learning about the precession of equinoxes anyway. But it doesn't take away any accuracy from those ancient megalithic constructions, because the constellations at the time that they were building these structures, they were merely used as markers. And those markers helped with their configurations of where to put the stones, how to align them in relation to our solar year cycle on Earth. And the solar year cycle on Earth, that hasn't changed. That's still the same as it always was. But the positions in the heavens, as we might say, the positions in the skies, that changes. So the Pleiades star cluster, it does feature in many folklore myths and anecdotes. And when they are featured, there is a relationship to the dead and passing. So this belief does go way back in some way. So this time relates to the dead and the passing, and also our connection to the spirit world in some way. Now, in some traditions, this middle place, I don't like using the veil because there's a division. I don't think there is a division at this time. I think there's an understanding, there's a contemplation. It's like as if we all everything comes together. So this middle place, we'll call it, the place of spirits and ancestors, is a meeting place where our imagination, I mean, it's like smelling the roses. We become still, so our imagination, our archetypes, all the spirits, we get visions of our ancestors, we get a clairvoyance of space, and all this appears, all this resides in this middle point where we all join together. I'm getting really complicated now, aren't I? Anyway, I think it's understandable why there's an overlap between the fairies in our folklore mythology. There's really emergence of the she fairies and our references for the dead. So either way, around the northern hemisphere, November, whichever way you want to call it, is a month that's dedicated to our deceased loved ones, ancient ancestors. And this happens and spirit connections, and all this happens in many cultures and traditions. So the Pleiades star cluster is or was very much part of a ritual observation at this time of year in ancient times. It must have been. Now, in the book Harvesting the Stars, there is a pagan temple in Lusmulling, County Meath. Now, this is mentioned by Aidan O'Connell. Let's get this up. I got a picture on this. And that's the henge there. It examines a recent discovery and the documentation of a Pleiades alignment that's in the Gubber Valley. And that's the Lissamullen henge there has been looked at closely. But the actual valley itself is it's beneath the hill of Tara in County Meath. Now, as well as this, here we go. There's Anthony. He's got this video of the Stone of the Seven Suns at Delve. And this was named Stone of the Seven Suns by the very recently passed over deceased Martin Brennan. And It's been suggested to portray Pleiades. It's Anthony Murphy who he's watching here, and so this was what he came up with as the connection with this song with Pleiades in Mythical Ireland, and also alongside researcher Richard Moore. Now, Anthony has drawn attention to this South legend, and I find this even more fascinating, relating to the King Brazil Bull Debad, because in the story he's lacking in cattle. And this was during a time of the great cattle famine in ancient times. I don't know the dates of it, but the story tells that because of the famine, that this King Brazil, he was actually left with 1 bull and 7 cows, and this would be an excellent reference to, I'll come up with this. There you go, reference to Taurus, the 1 bull, with 7 sisters of Pleiades there on his neck, behind his ear. And interestingly, as well as that, the Pleiades, known as a group of 7 stars, are also known as the 7 sisters. And then you got that in the heading of that diagram there. And it may have been possible to have linked this story to the swans, as the Woodland swans, they're said to arrive at Newgrange at this time of the year. There's also an old tale of Orion, which is next to the Taurus there, chasing those 7 sisters of the Pleiades across the sky before they actually turn into swans or doves and make their way to land at Newgrange and elsewhere around Ireland. Now, a more obvious connection is how Pleiades as a cluster resembles a long-necked bird in flight. Now, let's go back to that. I wonder if... Do you actually see? Have I got that? No. Don't know why I've done that. Let's get back to that. I'm trying to get something in picture. No, maybe I don't have a picture of that. But if you can get some images of the Pleiades, it does look like a long-necked bird in flight. I could actually extend David's review of Pleiades with my own personal experiences, but that would take another complete nature echoes, and with that I could talk about various sites around Ireland talked about as being connected to Pleiades and the 7 swans, and even some of these places are where Woodland swans actually land each year. And add to that, there's many more Taurus and bull references. I could even go to Grange and come up with a bit of that connected to the Grange Circle B. But right now, I've got to move on with the show. People are commenting, and I've been on for such a long time. And so Josie Posey here's R.E.P. Martin, lovely gentleman. And Claire's here. Claire's somewhere in the building, I think, or she's listening to this in the car and enjoying the broadcast. Lovely, thank you. And there's Anthony. Please, I propose that the Dove myth must relate to Taurus. There we go, Anthony. I did cover that, as you said. I bumbled through that, but it's lovely that you've got the video just to get everybody in the gear of this. Since we're privileged to have Anthony with us, I'm going to go tumbling back through this. There you go. Just a reminder, look on, do a search on YouTube, watch the video, and it'll be much more informative with the pacing through for the few seconds that I've been doing just now. Right, so what else? Andrew St. Ledger. I must say a few words about him, even though I am late with this. Trying to keep to half an hour. It never happens these days. But I'm going to make this the 3rd echo today because very important. Andrew St. Ledger, let's get him up. There he goes. The passing of Andrew St. Ledger is about almost a week ago now, but it's very heartbreaking. And I'll just quote some of the Woodland League's press release rather than use my own words much, because to me, they were his passing back to the trees. Andrew's gone back to the trees, and they explain it much better than I could because they worked with him, they lived with him. So what they're saying is, we of the Woodland League, we're heartbroken at the passing of our great and mighty friend, our founder, our director, our champion, our warrior, our guide, our leader, Andrew St. Ledger. And there he is. The mighty oak sadly has fallen. And Andrew had a vision of Kilcash Woods, his woodland, and the woodland was quite a size actually, but his vision was that wood representing places all over Ireland where forests were being felled. And we live in the heart of Inishna Fiorda. Fada, I mean, Fiorda, or Fada, I'm not sure how to pronounce that, but whatever it is, Inishna Fada, the island of the sacred trees, which is one of the ancient bardic names for Ireland. Now, Andrew's vision was to restore the remnant shreds of little bits that we got around the country, around where he lived and worked with Celt around Loch Derg in Clare, and you'll see a lot of this around Loch Ree, Roscommon on one side, Longford the other, and all those little remnants, shreds of what were once great oak forests. But where he was around Loch Derg, that was known as the Great Forest of Orty. Actually, that forest it ran from Gort in Clare right through to Portumna and down below to Granny, and it incorporated the Brian Boru's oak. And there's some Brian Boru's oak picture there. Not the best, but that's the best I could give you for now. And this oak was right in the middle of the forest, trying to preserve the very similar project to what Trees for Life are doing in Scotland, where they've done a remarkable job over the years of bringing back the North Caledonian forest. So this was what Andrew visioned, similar for Ireland as well, especially around Clare. And in fact, Derry Bryan, because as you may know, Brian Boru, he was an O'Brien. And so Derry Bryan was actually also known as Brian's Oakwood. And this was known as a stronghold where the young, the old, the sick, they could find refuge in times of war. So Andrew drew up the first draft of the vision for the Great Forest of Orty in 2012, which was, interestingly, was when we started up Bards in the Woods. I didn't realize the two were coming together. I thought the Woodland League was older, but it was very nice because in 2012, they said, oh, maybe that's a good idea. Though they did laugh at what we were doing a few times, but it was in good jest because I got on very well with Andrew. But so in 2012, an incredible development in conjunction with the Woodland League, its members and other advisors. And Andrew said, the Irish people, there are forest people who have lost their forests and with it much of their ancient culture. So restoring the oak forest can have a very positive impact, affecting other aspects of the Gaelic culture that remains, like the music, the poetry, the sport, the dancing, and the storytelling, all of which are intrinsically linked to this ancient forestry tradition. That's like the heart of it. To me, it's both the forest and the water that is stored in, especially in the oak trees, like 300 gallons a day, I think, can be held up into an oak tree. So amazing what help that does to prevent flooding. Anyway, as part of Andrew's work and passion through the years since 2012 towards realizing his vision. So this year, there was an amazing event. Luckily, he was alive for it. Andrew arranged a beautiful event that was attended by the Woodland people and the friends. And it was a celebration of the 20 years, marking the 20 years of the Woodland League. A beautiful event on a beautiful summer's day in July. All of it, people coming together, reimagining the Great Forest of Orty. And so we're also the Woodland League, they're very proud of another aspect of Andrew's work that he did with the Woodland League, which is the Forest in a Box project. It is a lovely thing. It's where his thoughts were on getting children involved and focusing on them becoming the forest people of the future. The plan, again, another of Andrew's vision and part of his legacy, is that how can we make it possible to increase the reach of the project nationwide? Let's install a forest in the box in every national school where the aim is to inspire the creation of new native woodlands in the footprints of the old native forest sites. And that's a project that's been underway for several years now, Andrew said at this time. And these children, they're investing in their own future in a unique way that combines the past, present, and the future. So it's amazing that some of the acorns that they collect acorns that fall around the Brian Boru oak tree that I showed earlier. That's said to be 1,000 years old. So these children are actually planting acorns that were gathered from that oak tree, and they're continuing the legacy through their own plantations. And so Andrew also, the one thing I was impressed, and I'm bringing this up, is Andrew really had the lingo of politicians. He really knew how to speak their language. So he got involved in spearheading campaigns, knew the lingo, knew the language, and boy, could he pack a mighty punch when he was campaigning and lobbying on protection of woodlands, or on anyone who was threatening our current and future native forests. And just this year, the Save Our Forest group, which I've still been lingering and putting events on in woodlands, they combined with the Save Our Lands Alliance, and that was all put together with his guidance. And now what's happened is that alliance is more than 40 national environmental NGOs, various community groups, political parties, independent TDs, because the party TDs don't necessarily get in on this, but also numerous individuals amongst other concerns, and they're all together to bring about sort of bigger impact for bringing about actions and policy to save, restore, and expand the ancient rainforest remnants. Now, Andrew's wish for all this valuable work to be done, he'd wish this just to keep continuing, and it is, and it's going to continue. The Woodland League is still there, and they're thanking Andrew for that gathering in July because it showed everybody was together, and they personally wish to continue what he stood for, restoring the relationship between people and their native woodlands. So may his deep soul and spirit journey forth at peace with the light of inspiration he kindled. That's their words, not mine. Better than what I would say. And continuing the passion for continuing our love and the strength, the compassion and friendship he shared with all of us who encountered and knew him. But my feelings is Andrew St. Ledger's already sorely missed, and his memory, mentoring, and guidance and inspiration is only going to become stronger and more widely supported. I believe in that. And so to repeat again, because I'm very, I'm trying to find the right word. I feel very close to this, of what Andrew spoke of, even though I'm a blow-in. But the Irish people, they were forest people who have lost their forests, and with it, much of the ancient culture. Restoring the oak forest can have very positive impact on affecting other aspects of the Gaelic culture that remain, like the music, poetry, sport, dancing, and storytelling, all of which are intrinsically linked to this ancient forest tradition. Now, why I feel close to that is because during my years in Scotland, I was involved in this as well. And I'm very proud with what we got through. And I do have one of my sons who's continuing work, actually not only through Scotland, moved through UK, doing very similar things to what Andrew has been doing there. So it's very vital. Now, lots of comments have been coming in. Have to beg off early. It's because I'm going on late, but thanks for being with us, Terry. And Josie Posey, thanks for Andrew St. Ledger, indeed. Thank you as well. Now, there's just one more thing, very brief. I know I'm going for an hour, but yesterday, the Longford Ancient Ways, yesterday evening here at 7 p.m. on the 7th of November, there was a launch in our Dar, Longford, of this amazing book. Let's get some more space on the screen to show this. It doesn't really come up because I got the green screen. There you go. Longford's Ancient Ways. They had the book launch yesterday evening. Stunning book co-written by Anne Geraghty Smith and Annette Corkery. Unfortunately, I couldn't get to that book launch. But as you see, I got a copy of their stunning photography, full-color book, lovely stories. It's a celebration of the beauty and heritage of Longford through lots of imagery, fantastic imaginative imagery, story, lore, and mythology. It's a wonderful insight into the biodiversity of that is actually lovelier in Longford than you may think. So, and they combine that biodiversity with the folklore. They do it well, I tell you, they do it very well. But what I'd like to do is a quality edition on Nature Echoes, maybe next week, reviewing that book properly. I haven't done it, I've just mentioned it this week and last week. Let's see, there's the book launch poster that they had for yesterday. And anyway, I'm going to keep this very short for now. And I got a picture of the book as well, perhaps to finish it. That's my photograph of my copy there. So thanks for watching the Nature Echoes. I'm not going to blab on about the subscribing and so forth, because if you've been with me still, you've been with me for an hour. Consider subscribing. I'll get the picture off at the moment. Let's get this going. There we go. That's all you need to know. Go to naturefolklore.com. You'll find out from the links there how to subscribe. But thanks. I've enjoyed being with you with this go on evening of Nature Echoes. If you're watching this as a replay, keep the questions going. I notice most people watch this as a replay now rather than turn up for the broadcast. And I do check and answer what you say. If you're on YouTube, click the bell icon. It gives you a message each week of what's coming up. So I wish you a safe week, full of wonder, inspirations, and all kinds of enchantments that happen in the presence of water, woods, and the mysteries of nature. So until next Wednesday, play well. That's as much as I got. Thanks for your patience of staying with me with these echoes. There was a lot going on. So thank you very much. And some other comment has come through. The Cliff thing is interesting. Thanks very much for staying with us, Cliff. And thank you, Anthony, Mystical Ireland there for that. So I think that's about as much as I can share with you. So thank you all very much. And I'll see you next Wednesday.